inside the potential ban on TikTok, Elon Musk's AI startup, and future-proofing your organization. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here today in episode 164 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. We help clients with their digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning and program management, change management, and process improvement during the implementation. So you can learn more about Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. Third Stage, not coincidentally, is also the sponsor of this podcast. So thank you for being here today. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions, and this is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy components of change. You can find new episodes every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And at transformationgroundcontrol.com, you can find all the past episodes on all the different platforms that you might want to listen or watch. So be sure to check it out there. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great episode in store for the audience here. We've got a few things we're going to cover up front. First, we're going to get to some audience questions on social media, some interesting topics that we always get. We always get really interesting questions for the audience, so we'll get to that here to start the episode. And then we're also going to get to a couple of interesting newsworthy topics here. One is about the digital marketing legislation that's emerging in the UK, the US, and other parts of the world. And within that, there's also the TikTok ban, which is sort of related to the whole digital marketing and social media side of things. We're going to dive into that here in the opening segment. And then we're also going to talk about Elon Musk's new AI startup, too. We've talked a lot about Elon Musk on this podcast in the past. We do it intentionally, thinking that if we talk about him enough, he will call us and want to be on the show. So that's our whole strategy. Or if anyone knows Elon Musk, tell him we're still trying to get him on the show, which will happen someday. It's just a matter of when. So we'll talk about Elon Musk's AI startup here in the opening segment. And then later in the show, we'll have our first guest, which is Friska Wirya. She's a consultant based out of Australia, and she has recently published a book called The Future Fit Organization. And she's going to be on the show talking about how to future-proof your organization and how to future fit your organization. We're going to talk about the difference between future proofing and future fitting. And it'll be a fascinating conversation to really dive into her book and some of the things that she covers there. And then later, after Friska's on the show, we're going to have Cheatham and Amanda Patton on the show talking about the role of third-party vendors and partners in digital transformation. So we'll dive into how to manage vendors, how to identify the right partners and vendors, how to integrate with your team, all that good stuff. So stick around for that. We'll cover that later in the show. So to get started here, Darian, what are some of the questions that you found for us on social media here in the last week?
Yeah, so the first one is from our YouTube video, or your YouTube video, on system architecture. This comment is, maybe this is too in the weeds, but would you create events based off these occurrences? So when you take that transaction in the CRM, is there also a record created that represents the salesperson getting commission in the HR system?
Yeah, super interesting. So just to add some context, there's a video on my YouTube channel that's called What is Solution Architecture? And in that, I just talk about how you build an architecture for technology within, not only within a transformation, but just in general. How do you do it? And so the audience member, or the viewer, is asking the question of how do you transact data or integrate data in between multiple systems? So in other words, if you have a CRM system, salesperson makes a sale, do you somehow integrate that into your HR payroll system to show that you owe that salesperson or that you're going to pay that salesperson commission? And the answer to that is yes. I mean, that's absolutely something that is very critical for solution architecture. The whole point of solution architecture is not only defining what your systems are, but also how they integrate and how the data is going to flow between systems. And if that's part of your end-to-end streamlined business processes that you want, which would make total sense, that if you have a salesperson that makes a sale, it sure would be nice if your HR and payroll system would just automatically have that information of what commission is due rather than someone having to manually enter it. Then you should do that as part of your architecture. So long answer short, I'd say yes, absolutely. You want to integrate as much as you can and show not only how systems interoperate, but also how data flows and also how process flows in between systems as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Our second question is also from a YouTube video, just a different one. And it's on the YouTube video, Supply Chain Management at Risk Being Automated. I think we also did some shorts on this if you see it on our YouTube shorts and our TikToks. But this viewer asked, so basically it would automate the more tedious, repetitive tasks. My question is, would this automation affect job prospects?
That's a great question. So, in other words, if you have automation in supply chain management, does that mean there's going to be less opportunity for jobs? I would say probably not. I don't think it's necessarily going to destroy jobs, but I think it will disrupt jobs and change jobs. So I would say that rather than being worried about is my career in supply chain management at risk, I would ask myself, what do I need to do to upskill and to keep up with the changing field of supply chain management? And that certainly is going to entail, an understanding of automation and an understanding of data analytics and AI. I think the people that really understand that piece of it, the data analytics and AI side of things, and they know supply chain management, that's going to be a super powerful skill set in the future. And I'd say the same thing too for any sort of technologist. If you're a ERP consultant or some sort of technology consultant focused on a certain type of technology, or if you're a business process consultant, having that understanding of how AI can affect a process change or a system rollout, system deployment, that's going to be super powerful, because I think that's going to be the new currency going forward for a lot of organizations. And the new competitive advantage is going to be how well do we use data, how well do we use analytics, and how well do we use AI. The tools are all emerging and sort of catching on the mainstream pretty quickly, but organizational use and business value within AI is still very immature. It's very early. So the companies that can figure that out faster and the people that can figure that out faster and add value in that area, I think are going to be in super high demand. That also goes, by the way, for data scientists too. If you're a data science person, that's going to be, I think that'll be a super hot major field for the next couple decades from what we're seeing so far.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of AI, our next question is about actually OpenAI. And this user believes, they say, I believe OpenAI is a flagship as far as AI quality is concerned, but it still has its issues. Basically, what do you think of people needing to go through? Do they still need to go through all this information, quote unquote, the old school way? Or can you just use this AI and just do some simple checks with it?
As far as like gathering information, you mean, or gathering knowledge on a topic?
Yeah, fact checking, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's it's super risky, I think, at this point to rely too much or to be solely dependent on what you get out of OpenAI or ChatGPT or any other AI model. It's still flawed. I mean, it's going to take some time to train AI how to be more accurate. But I think we talked last week, or I think it was last week or the week before, we talked about some of the biases in some of these AI models, only because humans create the data, and that data that's biased by humans is what is input into AI models to create their output. So, I don't know how we manage that, or how AI algorithms are going to sift through stuff that's biased or whatever, but I think you just have to be aware that you're not going to get a perfect answer. You're probably going to get a biased answer in some ways. So you want to add, I think it's really important to not rely just on OpenAI. You want to make sure you add your own human common sense and human knowledge to what's being done there to augment it. But it could be a good starting point. Like, we at Third Stage will use ChatGPT to take some of my videos and convert them into blogs, for example. And they're never perfect. A lot of times they sound like a robot wrote them. And so you have to kind of change it to make it sound a little more human and conversational and that sort of thing. That's just a small example, though. But if you get into hardcore research, or you want to get a one-page summary or a 300-word summary of a certain topic, that might be a great starting point. But if anything, you just use that as a starting point to springboard into deeper research or whatever. That's the way I view it.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of AI, I'm really excited to get into our topics today from articles, one being Elon Musk's new AI and the other being potential ban on TikTok in the UK and in the US and everything. So
Yeah, we're on a streak here with this podcast. The last few episodes we've talked about AI. I think just about every episode the last several several weeks. So it's fascinating how there's always something new, right?
yeah, every week I feel like there's something new popping up and somebody's starting something new with AI. So it's super interesting to dive into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to talk about Elon Musk's new AI startup, and then we're also going to talk about some of the digital marketing legislation in the UK, as well as the potential ban on TikTok, which is emerging here in the US where we're at. And both of those legislations or both of those regulatory moves are, quite likely to spread to other parts of the world too. So we want to talk about that. And then later in the show, stick around after we get to these newsworthy topics. We're also going to get into our first interview with Friska Wirya from a company called Fresh by Friska. And she's a consultant that focuses on change management. She also is an author that has a new book called The Future Fit Organization that was just released late last year. We'll tell you about how to get the book, but we're also going to dive into, with Friska, we're going to dive into some of the concepts in her book, talking about what is a future fit organization, how do you become future fit, how's that different from the other buzzword, which is future proof, and we're going to get into a bunch of that stuff here later today. So super fascinating conversation we'll have there on a very hot buzzword right now. And then later in the show, we'll have Kyler Cheatham and Amanda Cheatham on the show talking about the role of software vendors and partners in digital transformation, how to find the right partners, how to manage them, how to integrate them with your digital transformation teams, all that good stuff. So stick around. We're going to get to all that here as soon as we take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every week at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show at transformationgroundcontrol.com, so be sure to check it out there. You can also subscribe to the podcast, view past episodes, listen to past episodes on whatever platform you prefer by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients with digital transformations, and it is produced by Major Tom Productions. If you'd like to learn how to sponsor or feature your brand on this podcast, you can reach out to Major Tom Productions. I've included contact information in the description below, so be sure to check that out. You can also check the scrolling ticker thing that's scrolling at the bottom of your screen. If you're watching this podcast, you'll see the contact information on there as well. So, Darian, we've got a few a couple newsworthy topics we want to get into today. What do you have in store for us?
Yeah, so this first one is the Digital Marketers Act and the potential ban that the House just passed actually today, the 13th of March, on trying to get ByteDance essentially to sell their shares of TikTok. So if we kind of dive into this, since March 7th, 2024, major tech companies like Apple, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, and ByteDance are designated gatekeepers by the EU Commission. They must comply with this new act in the EU, Digital Marketers Act, or Digital Markets Act, sorry. The DMA, for short, aims to ensure fair digital markets in the EU by introducing rules for core platform services and strengthening rights for businesses and users. So, Eric, what are your initial reactions, I guess, to just hearing, I guess to give some context to, like I said, the House today just passed the bill that they are trying to get ByteDance basically to sell their shares to a U.S. company. What are your initial reactions to kind of all this stuff going on?
Yeah, I mean, on the TikTok front, I understand where the concern is, I suppose. I mean, first of all, we're active on TikTok. You and I are both active on TikTok. Our company's active on TikTok. So we're users of the product and service. But, all along, that you've got an app on your phone that could be, capturing or is likely capturing personal information. And I think the fear is that personal information getting back to the Chinese government, and what is the Chinese government going to do with that information? So I think it's more of a question and an unknown fear. I don't know how founded it is. I know it seems to be something that across the political spectrum, it seems to be a concern, regardless of political affiliation. It seems to be a fairly significant concern for a lot of people. I guess I don't know enough about it, honestly. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of unfounded fear. Maybe the unfounded fear is true, but I just don't know for a fact that, the Chinese Communist Party is stealing data and doing something with it. It could be. I mean, I could be completely off or just not know about it. But I just don't know how much of it is real versus just a perceived fear. I don't have a good read on that. Digital Markets Act, that's another interesting one too. It's sort of like, it reminds me of the I'm forgetting the acronym, but the Privacy Act in the EU that they passed around confidentiality of information. So there's two sides of it. As a consumer, I think it's great because I don't want marketers to have too much information about me. But as a marketer, as you and I both are, it kind of sucks not being able to have more access or more visibility into what people are doing, their behavior, all that stuff. And it sort of limits your ability to look at not just individuals, like looking at what Darian did, what website pages did you go to, or what other websites did you go to besides our website. It's not necessarily that. It's more aggregating data and looking at what's a click-through rate of an email we send. That information gets a little bit skewed or limited because of the privacy limitations, if you will, as a marketer based on the legislation in the U.S. So, the legislation in the EU. So it sounds like EU is taking this very seriously. I think it sounds like a lot of people are concerned about it. So if I'm a consumer, I get it. If I'm a marketer, I don't like it. So I have a split opinion on that.
Yeah, I definitely understand that from a marketing point of view. The more information, the easier it makes the marketer's job. So I definitely understand that point of view. And I can see it from the consumer side too, right? You don't want all your information out there. So
yeah.
I agree.
Curious to hear what the audience thinks, though. What does the audience think on this? Is this a good thing? Should we be banning TikTok in the U.S. and other parts of the world? Should we be regulating more, marketing activities and confidential information? I'd love to hear the audience's opinion, especially because I don't, like I said, for both topics, I don't really have a strong opinion, but I'd love to hear what the audience thinks on that.
Yeah, and I think another question I have to it is if ByteDance does end up selling their majority stock or majority shares to a U.S. company, how do people's opinion about TikTok and views on TikTok maybe change? I'm interested to hear that from you, Eric, also as well, but also from our audience, like what their thoughts on that are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I look at maybe more on the surface. I just look at the app itself. I think I don't know who designed the TikTok app, but it's a brilliantly engineered product, I think. I mean, it's a very cool, easy to use sort of app, and I see why people are hooked on it. And it's different than, YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels or whatever. It just has such an engaging interface, and the algorithm, for whatever reason, the algorithm seems to understand what I want to see a little bit better than some of the other algorithms. Maybe it's because they've got all this personal information that they shouldn't have about me. I don't know, but that could be. So it's sort of a double-edged sword potentially. But I don't know. I like. I love TikTok. I originally started doing it just to see if there was any marketing value. But as I start doing it more and get more and more involved with my TikTok channel, where I share all this stuff about digital transformation on there, I also like to just follow sports and other things that I'm interested in on there, and it's super fascinating. So I think it's a pretty cool. It's a cool thing. I think they do a good job too of like bringing together like a global community too. So there's a lot of, I'd say, societal benefits and luxuries that come along with the app, but there's that dark side too that we've got to manage too.
Yeah, totally. And this is kind of an interesting question, but how do you think this DMA Act will impact the innovation and competition within the tech industry, especially for smaller companies or startups?
Well, on one hand, you think it's probably going to limit innovation or stifle it a bit, just because you have now suddenly you don't have as much freedom to do what you want. But at the same time, there's part of me that thinks that whenever you have a regulation or an act like that comes out, it just forces a certain amount of innovation. Now you've got to figure out how you're going to be innovative or do something creative in the context of those limitations. So I guess at the end of the day, I would pick out human ingenuity and innovation. I think that's going to win out over government regulation in the long term. It just might be short term. It might be a bit more painful for some startups.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Might be a little bit harder at the start, but I feel like as all these bills and stuff develop, we might see more clear pathways for what these startups and smaller companies have to do in order to do whatever they want, essentially.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I'm excited to dive into this next topic because we talked about this either 1 or 2 weeks ago on the podcast on how Elon Musk is suing ChatGPT. But now Elon Musk is now coming out with his own AI startup. So I'm excited to dive into this.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, so Elon Musk startup XAI plans to open source Grok. I don't know exactly how you say it. It's GROK.
Okay.
It's basically going to be try to be a Chat GPT rival, and realign some open source principles that Elon apparently doesn't believe that Chat has. It is featuring real-time information and access to politically correct, quote unquote, norms, and it is a part of XAI's subscription service. So you have to subscribe to be a part of this AI. In your opinion, I know we just talked about how Elon is suing Chat a couple weeks ago. Do you believe that this new AI will be much different than OpenAI?
I don't know. That's a good question. I do feel like, when I use ChatGPT or when I use Copilot/Bing, on the Microsoft side, those are the only two I've really been exposed to. I do feel like they're different. They're totally different in that, Copilot and Bing, for example, you could do more non-textual type stuff, whereas ChatGPT is more textual. But I think ChatGPT, at least when I'm looking for information or trying to summarize something or trying to get a leg up or a head start on writing something, I feel like ChatGPT is better for that. So I don't know. I do feel like there's different, very distinct interfaces and outputs that I get from both. I can't quite put my finger on what it is. So I have to think that, the Elon Musk, what is it, X.AI, or is it Grok or is it X.AI, or how do those two terms fit together?
The company is XAI, and then the AI itself is the
Grok or whatever it's called.
I don't know how he's pronouncing it, I guess, but so it's kind of like a company, and then similar to like OpenAI Chat. Kind of things.
Do you know when it's going to launch or anything? Have they said like when that, or is it already available now?
Yeah, I'm unsure if there is an official launch date. I do know that he's like really advocating for like certain principles that he believes there needs to be for this one, but I'm not sure if it has already launched or not.
Interesting.
Yeah, but what challenges do you see businesses that are going to be adopting open source AI platforms versus like ones that don't?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is going to be the confidentiality and intellectual property types of issues. So, ones that use OpenAI, and I don't know if this is what he's concerned about, by the way. I'm not sure what his concern is with OpenAI or ChatGPT, but it could be the fact that it is open and when you enter your information or when you give personal information into a AI model, now suddenly that AI has access, or that becomes part of its knowledge base. So you've sort of given up your confidential information or your intellectual property. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And then, of course, the other challenge is going to be, the good thing with OpenAI is it has access to such massive amounts of data, whereas if you limit it to certain users, then obviously you don't have as much data to train the system.
Yeah, definitely. And Elon Musk, as we know, has been a very vocal advocate for open source principles, even in his other ventures like Tesla, X, formerly Twitter, as we all know. How do you think this philosophy will shape the competitive landscape in technology going forward? Do you think that will have a lot of say or push or pull in the industry?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I think there's probably what's going to happen, which seems to happen throughout history, especially in the technology booms and busts, is you'll get a bunch of money chasing after all these AI companies, and companies that want to invest in X.AI, and other companies that want to invest in OpenAI, and Microsoft because of their involvement in AI. And then eventually you're going to shake out some of the competition, and you're going to be left with a couple big players. So I think that's probably what happens. I don't see how you support and sustain all these different big competitors with all this money getting thrown at them right now. So I think eventually there's going to be winners and losers. And I think, as we talked about, whenever that was, we talked about AI last week I know we talked about AI. The last few weeks we talked about AI, so it's all blurring together in my head, what we covered in each episode. But which is good. Everyone wants to hear about AI. But I think, it's normally I'm not a huge believer in big, huge technology companies having a sort of monopoly. But in this case with AI, I don't know that I would want them having a monopoly, but I think the scale is going to be even more important than ever, because just having access to data, and the more mass amounts of data you have, and the more quality data you have, the better the algorithm is going to be, the better AI is going to be, the smarter AI is going to be. So, being a startup, I would imagine, is going to be pretty hard if you're small, like if you're not Elon Musk and you don't have a lot of money, if you're just starting off in your garage. I think could be difficult to really get going and scale up, with the amount of data you would need to make it valuable to users. So that's how I think it'll unfold, but who knows? I can't predict the future as well as I'd like to think.
Yeah, definitely. I get that. And speaking of future, I'm really excited to dive into this conversation about the future of our listeners' companies and what you guys are going to be talking about today. So
yeah, we're going to talk about future fit organizations and future proof organizations with Friska Wirya next. She is a consultant. She owns a company called Fresh by Friska. She's based in Australia. She does work all over the world, and she's also an author of a book called The Future Fit Organization. So she's going to be on the show here in just a moment. She's been on the show one other time, maybe a year or so ago. Very great, very good conversation. We talked a lot about change management, but this time we're going to dive specifically into how to future-proof an organization and create a future fit organization. And then later in the show, we'll have Kyler Cheatham and Amanda Patton on the show here to talk about the role of third-party vendors and partners in your digital transformation. So stick around for that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance, You'll get real results, so you'll get some tangible results from the program, and you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. This podcast covers everything related to digital transformation, including the people, process, and technology aspects of change. And of course, this is a tech agnostic and independent podcast that covers all sorts of technologies and is not affiliated with any software vendors. Show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. You can learn more at thirdstage-consulting.com. And it's sponsored by or produced by Major Tom Productions. So be sure to check out Major Tom as well. If you'd like to sponsor this show or feature your brand on the show, you can reach out to Major Tom Productions using the contact information below in the description field. Or if you're watching this on video, you'll see the contact information scroll at the bottom of your screen here. So I'm excited for our first guest of this episode. We're going to have Friska Wirya on talking about future fit organizations, and she has a book out called, not coincidentally, The Future Fit Organization. So thought it'd be great to have her on the show and unpack what this concept means, how it's different from future-proof organizations, and how do you create a culture and an environment that is adept at changing and ready for the future. So with all that being said, Friska, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here as well. Second time now, so super excited.
Yes, you're becoming a veteran of this podcast, so thank you for being here. Mm-hmm. And actually, what's interesting is I think after the last time you were on this podcast, very shortly after it, you published a book, and I think I knew you were writing a book, and I knew there was a book somewhere in discussion in your future. But then the book came out like pretty quickly after the interview, and the first thing I thought was, oh man, I wish I would have known the book. What was in the book? I could ask you some questions around that. So it was a great excuse to have you back on, where we could talk about the book. But before we start talking about the book, which is called Future Fit Organization, maybe you could tell us about yourself, Friska, which is your background and what you do.
Sure. I would say I've been obsessed with change for over a decade. So there's a few things that Fresh by Friska does. There's consulting, coaching, and facilitation. In terms of consulting, I help very large organizations accelerate their digital transformation, specializing in the engineering, technology, and mining industries. I also run a series of different workshops on many different topics, cross-cultural communication, influencing without authority, building change management capability, and I also speak on the topics of future fitness, etc. So there's a few different arms. I've been in change for a very long time, and since then I've worked all around the world in 6 of the 7 continents. So Antarctica is the only place that I have not worked in. So that's next on my to-do list. And it's usually, yes, I'm there to drive technological transformation, but really you can't get the most benefits from technology if you don't also change your culture. So you can't suddenly implement the best of breed, for example, AI tools, without cultivating a culture that's open to learning, innovation, and growth. So that's what keeps me busy in my day-to-day.
Yeah. What is it that attracted you to the human element or the human side of change?
I get bored really easily. And after my MBA, I cut my teeth in general management consulting. And I felt like every project was roughly the same. It really wasn't challenging me. And I was in LA for 4 years and I came back to Australia. And when I came back, it was only then change management started to be recognized as a discipline. And it really intrigued me. It played to all my strengths. You know, the communication, the developing trust and rapport, the engaging with people from all different walks of life, combined with the analytical ability. And I thought, I want to give this a try. And so I took a big gamble on myself. I took a 40% pay cut, and I started from nothing. I started as a lowly change analyst, and I just worked my way up with unwavering dedication and laser-like focus. I got all the bits of paper, so all the credentials. And since then, I've done all sorts of changes like mergers and acquisitions, global restructures, operating model redesigns, many, many technology implementations. And fast forward 7 years later, I was the youngest GM of change for a big gold mining company. And yeah, that's how it all started, because I was curious, I was bored, and I knew I'm the type of person that likes to do different things all the time. And it appealed to me because it's not a cookie cutter approach. Yes, you have frameworks and templates and models, but what works for company A is not going to work for company B, because they're completely different cultures and no two changes are ever the same.
Right. Yeah. Makes total sense. What is it that brought you from, you're originally from Indonesia, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
What brought you from there to Australia? I know you said you like to travel and you've been all over the world, but what brought you to Australia, just out of curiosity?
Civil unrest. So back in the 80s, it wasn't a very safe place to live. And my grandparents just wanted better opportunities for me. And they decided to move to Australia.
Okay. So
and they chose Australia. Yeah, grew up in Australia, chose Australia because it was the closest Western country to Indonesia. And we just kept on flying back and forth. Yeah.
Interesting. Very cool. And that probably, I imagine that influences your interest in world travel too, just having the kind of multinational experience at a young age.
Yes. And also because I've only ever, my sweet spot is very large organizations, and they're usually highly multicultural and multinational. So I need to have a really strong sense of local cultures, traditions, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, traveling all over the world, living all over the world, I imagine helps give you that credibility and understanding that a lot of us don't have.
Yeah.
So what's the name of your book? I hope it's called Future Fit Organization, right? Or the Future Fit Organization. Okay. Yep. I want to make sure I got the title precisely right. But what's the premise of the book, and what's this concept of future fit organizations? What does that mean, and kind of what's the premise of the book?
So as I said, I've spent years helping very large organizations, helping them adapt, helping them thrive, because this world is constantly changing. It's uncertain, disruption every week. And so they have to be agile, innovative, and be able to pivot quickly. I think quickly is the main word, to keep up with the pace that the world is changing. And when we consider, like I was reading a stat the other day, McKinsey says the pace of change today is 3,000 times more than the impact of the Industrial Revolution. That's significant. So everything's happening at warp speed. Like, for example, the things you learn at university today, in 5 years, they'll probably be obsolete. So they'll probably be useless. Right. So these statistics highlight how important it is to not be future-proof, but to be future fit, to be ready, to be agile, to be resilient. And when things do change, instead of bouncing back from adversity or challenge, we bounce forward. We actually bounce forward better and stronger than we were before. So this is what I mean by future fitness. It's exactly like physical fitness. It's about building that strength, that flexibility, that resilience that organizations need in the years to come.
Right. Now, this book was published when, was it the fall or summer of last year?
It was September. Late September last year.
Okay. And what's interesting timing of your book being published is that comes out just a few months after ChatGPT, for example, sort of took the world by storm. And that's a great example of what you just said about the stat about 3,000 times faster change now than the Industrial Revolution. And that's a good context, or a good backdrop for the timing of the release of your book. But what I'm curious is, you alluded to this a second ago, but I want to go a little bit deeper into it. How is future fit different than the word future proof? And so, we're used to hearing that term future proof. A lot of software companies say, hey, if you want to future proof your business, you've got to invest in our software and that'll make you future proof. How is that different, or that general concept different from future fit and vice versa?
I actually don't think future-proof is possible. I think you've got to be pretty damn very, very arrogant to think that you can predict the future and put plans in place to mitigate whatever's coming. Like lots of different changes, like COVID, right? Entire organizations, entire countries were caught off guard. Even those countries that have experienced similar pandemic-style diseases, like Taiwan had the bird flu, Hong Kong had SARS, they were all still, oh my God, like deer in the headlights. Some things we simply cannot predict. It is impossible. So instead, we have to build the change resiliency muscles now so that whatever does come down the line, we're ready to evolve our pivot and pivot our business to minimize that impact.
Right. So it's more of a conditioning to be in a certain state.
Conditioning, preparation, exactly. Yeah.
But it's not defined. It's not suggesting that you are going to be able to bypass or avoid the future state or
you
protect
cannot,
yourself from the future state, but you're ready.
Correct. But you can have, for example, a change framework ready to go, a crisis change management plan, like all, processes documented. You can run, just like how schools do fire drills, you can run drills with your organization to make sure that their change muscles are actually strong enough to withstand whatever's coming down the line in the future.
We're here with Friska Wirya talking about future fit organizations and what you can do to make your organization more future proof. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear? If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or a free guide that we publish. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
And I'll do anything you ever dreamed to be complete.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name is Eric Kimberling with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent technology consulting firm, and it is produced by Major Tom Productions. We're here in the midst of a conversation with Friska Wirya talking about future fit organizations. Let's dive back into the conversation. I'm curious to hear from the audience and their opinion on this whole future fit versus future proof concept. What are your thoughts on the terms? Is future proof a possibility? Can we be future proof? Is that a viable buzzword? Even though it is a buzzword, it doesn't mean it's viable. But I'd be curious to hear from the audience what they think on that too. But I like that. I like how, because at first, honestly, when I heard the title of the book, I was like, future fit, that's different. I'm used to hearing future proof, not future fit. So I think it's a smart move to sort of differentiate or clarify what that means versus future proof. But you started to allude to this a moment ago, Friska. You started to talk about, having a crisis management plan and some of the things you can do to become future fit. But what are some of the key components that make an organization fit for the future? Or how would you describe an organization that's future fit versus one that's not?
So one of my favorite quotes that I've put in the book is futurist Alvin Toffler. He said, "The illiterate of the future will not be those that cannot read or write, but those that cannot learn, relearn, and unlearn." So I totally agree. A future fit organization is an organization that's continuously learning and unlearning. They're not carrying forward these unproductive, unhealthy mindsets, behaviors, processes, and policies. So, if we think future means at a later time, and fitness can be described as being suitable to fulfill that role or task, it means they are constantly reviewing what's working, what's not, and only bringing forward the best of the best. So a future fit organization is an organization that has a fluid and flexible mindset and seeks out change over comfort. They recognize that the performance of their tech stack is only limited by the power of their people stack. They hire for character instead of over-indexing on capability. They look out for key traits such as openness to change, such as assuming positive intent. Why these two traits? Because they are the traits that bring transformation alive. They are what's going to get people willingly moving out of their comfort zones into their growth zones. And they also start prioritizing, I don't like to call them soft skills, I call them critical skills, skills such as empathy, such as curiosity, such as the ability to engage with people from different cultures, because this is what's needed. It's about balance. Like STEM skills, obviously very important, but they are useless in isolation.
Right. That's interesting. And so is it fair to say then that an organization that you walk into and consult to, I'm sure you've seen this, I imagine, but you walk into an organization and you hear a lot of people say, well, that's not the way we do things, or we've always done it this way. And that seems to be where they're grounded, is like, we've always done this for the last 10 or 20 years. We can't tell you why.
Yeah.
We just know that we don't want to change because we've always done it this way. Is that sort of
I call them the nostalgia seekers.
Right.
They only see problems instead of potential opportunities for innovation and growth. And yes, those sort of people are very common. And it's okay to have those sort of people, but if they make up the majority of your people stack, then you're in trouble, right? You need to balance that out with change makers, with people that are enthusiastic, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, that have a vision, that know kind of what's out there in terms of technology and innovation, and have a vision for how that particular solution could benefit the business. What's rare is people that have that knowledge and awareness combined with being organizationally set up for success. And when I mean organizationally set up for success, I mean they have the right relationships, they have a solid sponsor, they have a strategy to execute whatever they're planning for this particular technology. Not just that, shock horror, they have a budget to actually execute the darn thing. And that's where I see a lot of organizations kind of fall over. They have a very clearly documented strategy, but then when it comes to the change management, because it's installing something is very different from implementing something. Installing something is easy. It's in. It doesn't mean you're getting any of the benefits. So to get proficiency, to get adoption, to get ultimate utilization, that's implementation. And suddenly there's never any budget left over. So I think that's why the rates of digital transformation are still, the success rates are still stubbornly, appallingly very low.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic where an organization sets a budget on what the priorities are for a project by starting with the software. I'm going to go shop for some technology. Let's say it's $10 million US. $10 million US. Okay, that's my starting point. Now I've got to figure out what to add on to that. And if at some point your board or your management team says, no, you're not going to add that much on, you're going to have to throttle back. And you're probably not going to cut back that 10 million. You're going to keep the 10 million in this example, but you're going to cut change management. You're going to cut cultural change, some of the things you're talking about here, which is a really unhealthy, problematic mindset as far as human behavior, organizational behavior. So let's unpack the different dimensions and just make sure I'm sort of understanding or tracking with you on like the themes. So you have cultural change, which is sort of the mindset shift and the ability to learn and unlearn, like you said. There's the organizational structure is sort of what you're alluding to. Is that what you mean? Like how you organize and how you collaborate and how you have people working together. And
yes, it's not just having the right people with the right skills, but the right mix of people in both workforce and delivery teams. Holistic perspective, and you can see around corners more.
Yeah. Interesting. There's a question here that's a little bit out of scope for this conversation, but I actually want to bring it back into scope and ask you a question here. It's sort of like more of a case study, really. And this is a question on YouTube. It says, what are the advantages to using AI in the manufacturing industry? And we don't necessarily need to go down that path just because we're more focused on future fit organizations. But
Yeah.
I think there is a question sort of embedded in there that we could pull on a little bit here. And that is, when you look at something like AI, and I think it's a good example of fast changing technology that can either overwhelm an organization so much so that they resist the potential adoption of AI, or they could, if they are a future fit organization, they're going to be a little bit more creative and open to how we use AI to make ourselves more effective as a team. So how would you, just at a high level, how would you take that use case here, or that case study of AI and a manufacturer that's, say, an old school manufacturer, and maybe they're struggling to figure out how to adapt to AI and get more value out of it? How does this future fit concept, how could it help them be better at leveraging technology like that?
So, first of all, that question is quite relevant to my experience in mining. So mining and manufacturing is very similar. They follow key processes, and for mining, for example, it's digging, it's leaching, it's cleansing, it's all these different processes. And in my previous role at that gold mining company, AI was used a lot. That team actually had the largest AI team in terms of those big miners, and they improved many, many things. They improved safety, they improved throughput. So I'll give you an example. One of the pipelines to transport slurry, a mix of ore and water, would get blocked every 8 months, roughly. No one had any idea why, without fail. And, in those sort of sectors, one downtime event could be like $26 million down the drain. We're not talking like $100 mistake here. And AI was used to analyze data. So lots of different data, water temperature, pressure, humidity, et cetera, literally hundreds of thousands of bits of data. And from that, it developed a predictive algorithm of when this particular piece of equipment would go down, and therefore it allowed. So in 1 year alone, so AI can be used to either predict things or to optimize things. So optimize things could be, when should I repair this thing? When should I take this off to ensure that throughput remains high? So those sort of things requires a lot of data to come to that, impossible for a human to do. And in this particular situation, if we were to think of the future fit concept and how manufacturing and other quite conservative industries could leverage this, is that, again, if you want to be future fit, you need to learn new things. You can't keep on using the methods of yesterday and expect you'll be able to crack the problems of tomorrow. It just doesn't work that way. And so, you have to start. I'm a big believer in that any big change or transformation needs to start and be supported at the very top. So my first port of call would be to engage and get alignment among the senior leadership team on what AI can and will do for the business. Start small, so get a pilot off the ground, whet the appetite for change, right? You don't want to kind of intimidate them and say, hey, let's launch these 20 projects, give me $20 million to do this. Start small, execute ruthlessly, get the wins, whet the appetite for more change, and you'll see that other departments will start to be interested and follow suit. Because no one wants to look stupid, no one wants to fail. So start small, get an A+, and then replicate.
Right. So is becoming a future fit organization, is it a top-down endeavor that starts with executives? Is it a bottoms-up sort of grassroots sort of thing, or is it both?
I think it needs to be. It doesn't necessarily have to start at the top, but it definitely needs to have the support of the top. Because if it's grassroots, but they're not getting the airtime, they're not getting the budget, what's the point? People are not going to bother trying anymore.
We're here with Friska Wirya talking about future fit organizations and what you can do to make your organization more future proof. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name is Eric Kimberling with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent technology consulting firm, and it is produced by Major Tom Productions. We're here in the midst of a conversation with Friska Wirya talking about future fit organizations. Let's dive back into the conversation. One of the questions I had for you that I was going to ask you later, but since we're on the topic, I'll ask it now. How can executives of organizations, you were talking about leadership a moment ago and how it's so important for the top to be supportive of this, but how can they, assuming that it is sort of more of a top-down approach, or you have an executive or leadership team that wants to become more future fit, what are some of the first steps they can take to start to create that culture change and the moving the needle on becoming more future fit?
I would say they need to first role model it, share the things that they're learning, share the things that they're unlearning. So once they do that, people will start to follow suit, because at the end of the day, everybody looks to leaders to get an understanding of how are things done around here? What's valued? What are your objectives? What should I prioritize on? So if you want to change other people, the first port of call would be to change yourself. The second part would be to develop change leadership skills. So what's the mindset to navigate uncertainty and change effectively? And, you're not taught this in schools, you're not taught this in universities. So these sort of qualities include empathy, resilience, adaptability, and they have to be overlaid with really good engagement and communication skills. And in this hyper-connected world where really we are borderless, this will become more and more important. So those are my top two sort of first steps to start. Start with yourself, and then the others will follow.
Right. So that's a great overview or summary of what executives can be doing. Back to your example a moment ago of AI adoption and results within the mining client that you worked with. Here's a follow-up question from Mohammed on YouTube. He asked, is this the same as data mining? So that example you gave where AI was taking that massive data. Okay. How would you differentiate data mining from AI, even though it's a little bit outside of what we're talking about here, but still relevant?
Data mining is purely going into data to identify patterns, whereas the example that I talked about, yes, there was a lot of data, but we then developed algorithms to not just get insights from it, but develop a set of recommendations of what to do.
Right. So it's a step further than just getting the data and accessing it and consolidating it. It's adding the algorithm.
Yeah, people have this misconception, like an AI project is not cheap. And it takes months, a lot of data to train the algorithm as well. So this is not like a $10,000 project. I think that's what a lot of people have misconception of, especially when it's projects of this scale as well. When $26 million is on the line, there's a lot of things you have to measure to identify patterns.
Yeah, very good. Here's a question from Jordy on LinkedIn. What are some examples of unlearning programs and actions that organizations can do? So when you talk about that learning, unlearning cycle, what do you mean? Like, give us some examples of how organizations could do this or demonstrate it.
Okay, I can't remember what the company is called, but they are in Sweden. And every Friday they celebrate mistakes. So people share their mistakes, what they learned from it, and what they'll stop doing as a result of that. So if you're serious about the unlearning, it needs to be celebrated. It needs to be normalized. It needs to be discussed openly, just like your values. So that's an example of an organization that's bringing that unlearning concept to life, right? Because as adults, we're all weighed down by behaviors that no longer serve us. So extrapolate that with however many people are in an organization. Like, the people on this call, how often do you review your own behaviors and think, you know what, I shouldn't be doing that anymore. This is what I'm going to do to stop that. It probably very rarely will someone put their hand up and say, yeah, I do that all the time. So the same needs to happen in organizations.
Yeah. So not being afraid of failure, but embracing and most importantly, just making sure you learn from it and incorporate those learnings into how you move forward. Yeah, very good. Well, great question. Thanks, Rorty, for that. Another question I had is why do some organizations have trouble? Well, let me back up. What percentage would you estimate if you, unless you have data with precise numbers, but if you had to estimate, what percentage of organizations do you think are truly future fit right now?
I do not have data with precise numbers. From what I'm observing through media, through my own client work and that of my contacts, I'd say it's in the single digits.
Wow. So let's call it 90% plus are not future fit. Why? What's wrong with those other 90% plus? Why are they, let's assume they all know that they want to be future fit. Why aren't they, or why do they have trouble with that?
Knowing and doing are very different things. And starting something is easy. Anybody can start something, right? Start learning a language, start writing a book. But the person that has the grit to continue, to actually finish, that's very rare. And it's the same with organizations. Future fitness, like any other fitness, just like physical fitness, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes consistency, it takes commitment to build. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. The discipline it takes, the reshuffling of priorities, the people you need to get on board to make a business case for it, especially if it's a large organization. Like that's a lot of effort. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of approvals, a lot of governance hurdles you need to go through. And and also the short-termism of people. So I've seen this a lot. Someone in the C-suite may be pushing some sort of agenda. They're passionate about this future fit concept. Suddenly there's a restructure, or they leave, or maybe they get fired, and then you have to start from ground zero again. So the larger organization, the more difficult. Also, there's still a misconception, a misguided belief that if someone is technically brilliant, then it doesn't matter if they're an asshole. And this is really wrong. Like, I've seen many organizations where one toxic person poisons the well for everybody else. Turnover so sky high. People resign. They take sick leave. They're on mental health leave. They exert only 10% effort. There are so many ways in which resistance manifests, but this is rarely tackled head on. And the nuclear option is very rarely exerted. And when I say nuclear option, I mean exiting that person from the business. People just keep putting up with it. And when people see that sort of behavior tolerated, they start checking out.
Yeah.
So how can you get them on board and excited about this concept of future fitness if they're seeing that happen in the hallways? And another reason why this future fitness is so difficult is because in the way people are incentivized and remunerated, especially C-suite, they're usually very short term. What are your this quarter's results? Profit, stock price, revenue. We don't balance this with longer term metrics or qualitative measures. So if they're not getting rewarded for putting their neck out to build this future fitness muscles, why would they want to do that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I don't know that it ever really occurred to me until you were saying it, but when you talk about the assholes, you look around and, there's a bunch of assholes around you. That negative mentality, whether it's being an a-hole or whether it's being a sabotager, someone that's going to sabotage, someone who's really negative, some of these negative connotations or these negative characteristics, those are the dominant characteristics oftentimes of an organization. It seems like those will win out over someone like, let's just say you're the person that's trying to be good, do the right thing for the organization. It seems like, if you have, if you get a certain tipping point, the well-intended people are going to lose out, and it's going to kind of reach this tipping point a little bit easier than it should for organization. It's very interesting. It's actually a lesson I learned in my first consulting company, just as a quick side story. That was my biggest single mistake I made with that company, was that I just hired based on qualifications. I was 32 years old at the time, and I knew there's a lot I didn't know, and I knew I needed a lot of smart people around me, people that were smarter than me, which I think that was the right intent. But then I would just disregard the fact that, like you said, oh, this person's kind of an asshole, but they're really smart, so I'm going to hire them anyway. They're really good at what they do, so I'm going to hire them anyway. And then suddenly I look around, I'm like, wow, I've created a culture that is not. And it was so hard to change. I couldn't change the culture, and so I ended up leaving that company. But that's a good example or a good thread that you're talking about here. I think it's really important for organizations to think about. Gets back to culture, of course, and how you build that culture of being future fit. And you can't do it when you've got a bunch of people that are really negative or can't think outside the box or are stuck in the past. What'd you call them? The nostalgia
seekers.
The nostalgia seekers. If you have even just a third of your company, if a third of your company is the nostalgia seekers, that 1/3 of the company is going to win out. They're going to override the other 2/3 just because it's a more powerful, sort of inertia or gravity that holds back an organization. Here's a question from Paul on LinkedIn, or just more of a comment. He says, interesting perspective. We are all encouraged to continuously learn. Continuously unlearning is a very interesting idea. Greetings from Ireland. So thank you for joining from Ireland.
Thank you,
today,
Paul.
Especially late in the day. It's late there in Ireland. So he must be having trouble sleeping right now. So thank you for joining. And that is a good point, though. He brings up a good point that I've never heard someone talk about this concept of unlearning. I've heard about people talk about like how you have to let go of the past, or just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean we should do it in the future. But you're framing it a little bit different, which I think is super effective. Yeah. What about so a lot of change involves technology initiatives. We've been talking, on and off about AI and other forms of technology, but how should we be treating these technology initiatives that a lot of us are going through? How should we be treating them differently as it relates to future fit organizations? So if we want to be future fit, how do we need to be different in terms of how we treat technology and technology transformations?
Okay, here's my top 3 tips. The first is cross-functional, cross-collaboration teams. So very often it's just the tech team that's leading it, and they forget everybody else. And that means there's silos, that departments don't know what's going on when implementing technology initiatives. So if we have a different mix of individuals in those delivery teams with diverse skills and perspectives, then to work together towards common goals, then by default, this will encourage innovation, more creativity, and more problem solving, leading to more effective solutions. Number 2 is really having the tech stack in the middle of whatever technology initiatives that you're doing. So this means being user-centric, really considering how they're experiencing things. So if we do that, most likely the needs, the preferences, and the pain points of the end users will be considered through research and feedback mechanisms. So that very rarely happens. Usually, like I'm on one right now, which is a huge S4HANA implementation, and the functional consultants just go ahead and deliver this, start building without considering, hey, we have to let people know about this. B, have we engaged them? C, do we know that the customizations, the compliance, and the legislation is considered when you're configuring this system? The answer would be no. And these sorts of things would not happen if we involved different people earlier. So if we place the user, the person, in the center of technology initiatives, we can ensure that the solutions really will be fit for purpose, drive meaningful impact, and make sure it meets those needs. And last but not least, sounds counterintuitive, but don't be afraid to change your plan. So I'm all about iterations. I don't believe in huge, long-term detailed plans because things change so fast now. So instead of clinging onto that rigidity, prioritize short feedback loops and continuous improvement cycles. So don't kill yourself trying to build a 6-month roadmap. Just think shorter cycles because market conditions change. You may get new customer feedback. There's new technologies, new versions. So don't be so hard.
We're here with Friska Wirya talking about future fit organizations and what you can do to make your organization more future proof. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown, Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
These things take time, mom and dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name's Eric Kimberling with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent technology consulting firm, and it is produced by Major Tom Productions. We're here in the midst of a conversation with Friska Wirya talking about future fit organizations. Let's dive back into the conversation. The second thing you mentioned, I think, is a really interesting one, because if I were to contrast what you just said about how your S4HANA example, where the project is going forward and starting to build the technology without involving the right people, a lot of times the organizational behavior is super interesting and fascinating to me, where so many organizations make the decision that, okay, we have decided to move forward with an S4HANA implementation. You get budgetary approval, management's on board, all that great stuff. And then it's sort of like, we're so excited, we got to go. So let's go bring on the system integrator, and all the consultants come in and start building stuff. And then a lot of times, like you're saying, someone might say, well, wait, hold on. Why are we building stuff? What are we building? Do we even know what we're building? What we're trying to accomplish here? Do we have the right people involved? But by then the freight train's already rolling. Your contract with the system integrator, they've already deployed 100 people on the project or whatever it is. And how do you break that cycle? Because it seems to be such a intuitive organizational behavior sort of thing. But I totally agree with what you said. I'm not just denying it. I'm just saying, but the organizational dynamic runs counter to what you're suggesting. How do you change that mentality, or how do you convince an executive team, like, you can call it time out and not start right now, and you should, and here's what you should do in the meantime to get ready for the implementation? What advice would you give?
Honestly, it's not even the executive team. It's the system integrator themselves. Just because this is what their scope is, and by hell or high water, they're going to deliver on that scope. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the change. Yeah. And again, it comes back to remuneration, reward, and recognition. They're rewarded. Their definition of success is on time. This is my scope. The modules are built. The integrations are built. Job done. Pay my invoice. So I think it needs to start even earlier. And at that kickoff meeting, you have to agree the preconditions for success. And the preconditions for success, I don't know, it's different for every organization. It could be, input from A, B, and C sort, X number of people engaged, their opinions and considerations reflected in the design. So it's different for different projects, but I think, your description of it being a freight train is very, very accurate. I feel like I'm pulling back with all my might saying, stop. But by that time, momentum, it's like you're going downhill really fast. And there's at that point in time, all you can do is keep raising the risks at Steerco. Make sure you have a really good sponsor at that senior leadership team, so they are aware of the risks and they can influence their power, and they can exert their power to say, stop, do this first. And they also have to be willing to say to the SI, okay, I know that's the timelines and the scope that we agreed on. Let's park that to the side now, because this is important. There's no point building a system on time if everyone hates it and it doesn't meet your regulatory and compliance requirements.
Yeah. And I think, some some organizations with forward-thinking leadership teams and project teams will get that, especially ones that have already made the mistake that it sounds like your S/4HANA client is making. If they've already made the mistake, a lot of times we find it's a lot easier to get that message across because they'll say, oh, yeah, we did that last time and we screwed it up and we saw the downstream consequences. But for an organization that hasn't made the mistake or maybe they've unlearned the wrong thing here, they did do it 10 years ago. They did the same thing, but they forgot or they just don't care to remember. It seems like it's easier to quantify what the impact is if I run over budget or if my SI takes longer than what I have in the plan or what I got approved budgetarily. But if I don't build a future fit organization, that one's a little fuzzier. It's longer term. I can't quantify that the same way I can quantify what's right here in front of me, which is the system integrator's here, the meter's running. I need to optimize the cost. So I don't know if you have a good answer for it, but it's like, how do you reconcile the thing that's right in front of you that you're worried about versus that longer term focus on future fit capability building?
Well, for me, it's quite easy. So if we think of if we compare a future fit organization with someone that's unfit, so you just have to think of two different scenarios. Like if an organization is more future fit, is it likely that people will stay, for example, 12 months longer because they like the culture? The answer is yes. If an organization is more future fit and they have really engaged charismatic change leaders, does it make sense if a new joiner, if their time to productivity improves from, say, 3 months to 2 weeks? The answer is yes.
Right.
And does it make sense then if people love working in a future fit organization, they will refer other people to join and that will reduce your recruitment costs? Mm-hmm. Yes. So if we use those 3 different metrics, say on a salary of, I don't know, $150,000 times 1,000 people, like that's real money.
Right.
It's real money. And, if you don't have the right traits, the right mix of people in the delivery teams, does it make sense then? Is it likely that your projects will run over budget? The answer is yes, because communication shit, people don't trust each other, blah, blah, blah. So you just have to think of, you may not have the hard data available online to prove your case, but these are very likely scenarios. Like what I'm talking about, very conservative estimates and very likely conditions to occur if you invest in the future fitness of your organization.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And, you look at a digital transformation of some sort, and let's just say you have a budget set for the entire project. And let's just say you've been forward thinking enough to set aside 15 to 20% of that budget for change management, more the human side of stuff. And you think, okay, we're going to do this right. But then, you get into a bind and you have to cut the budget because your technical stuff is running over and you've got to cut something. The natural inclination is to say, well, what if I cut the change management budget in half and I save 10% of the entire budget? That
save.
Right.
You either pay now or you pay more later. And
Exactly.
When I say pay more later, it'll take longer. It'll be more painful. People might leave, right?
Yeah.
People are like, this quiet quitting thing, it's a thing. If they're having a shit experience for the next 2 years because of your transformation, they're going to leave. And the cost of them leaving and the cost of you rehiring and recruiting, far more than the saving you did by slashing change management.
Yeah. And that's where I was going with it too, is like for every dollar you save by allegedly, saving money on change management, you're going to spend, I don't know what the number is, but if I had to estimate, I'd say at least 5 times as much, $5 for every dollar you save by cutting change, you're probably going to add another $5 of longer term costs. Problem is though, if I'm a project manager, I'm not measured, back to your point about
100%.
I'm not measured on, I'm measured on coming in on time on budget. So come out of high water, I'm finishing on time or on budget. If the downstream impact to our operations goes off the rails, that's not, that sucks, but that's not my personal problem because I'm not, I'm not measured on that. So if you're an executive, you need to set the right targets. I guess that's where we're going with this.
Yes.
You got to make sure people are behaving the right way. And sorry, rookie mistake.
And
my phone is not silenced.
That's okay. And can I say that there are ways, if you truly need to cut the budget for change, there are ways to do that, smarter ways to do that. For example, ChatGPT, it does a lot of grunt work that an analyst would usually do. There's a lot of AI solutions you can use to make collateral development go faster, etc. So it's not always cut people. It could be increase the number of tools that the change management team has, so they can do more with what they have. So yeah, it's not as easy as slash it in half, goodbye half the people in the team.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if we rethink our approach to digital transformation and the way we budget, the way we resource, the way we define our plans. What if we started with the future fit / change / people side of it? That becomes the core. And then you say, okay, it's going to cost this much to go through the operational and the people transformation. And then whatever's left, you add technology on top of that. What if you flipped it and said, we're going to add technology more selectively and more strategically, but we're really going to focus our efforts on not S4HANA in your example from before. It's not focused on S4HANA. It's focused on people and operational transformation, and whatever's left, we'll do the technology. Because I don't know about you, but I'd much rather see an organization implement a subpar technology or a more limited scope of technology, but do the change management, the human part of it really, really well. That organization is going to get a ton more value out of the transformation. They're probably going to be successful.
100%. It's like the equivalent of giving the newest generation iPhone to my grandmother. Like, she'd use it as a doorstopper. Like, it's the same. It's the same with organizations. You don't need the best of the best breed of whatever tool you're implementing if there's a huge deficit in the skill set and the appetite of your people to use that. So you're not going to fill that gap. Whereas if you say, to your words, maybe a breed technology, but your people stack is matching that, then you're going to get full adoption, full utilization. People are going to be happy about it. And you may actually get more benefits and save more money as well.
Yeah. And you know what else I just thought of? Not only that, but you know how nowadays every dollar you invest in technology is not just a dollar today, but it's a dollar every year into perpetuity plus escalation clauses. Whereas all this stuff investing in change management and the operational improvement, that's a one-time cost that goes away once you make it. So that's another benefit. You don't have that residual ongoing cost that's super high because you invested in all this technology that you're not using. So
100%.
But the problem that we have, back to numeration, the entire industry, the entire technology industry is built on paying people to sell software. They're not paying people to make companies successful in their transformation initiatives. And that's a big problem.
Yeah.
I don't know how you fix it, but that's misalignment of goals is a big problem for sure. So what other advice would you have for organizations about to begin a digital or business transformation? If they want to think beyond just the traditional, let's do a tech implementation, and they truly want to transform, they truly want to become future fit, what sort of closing advice would you leave for them?
Often the best ideas and innovations come from someone that's external to your industry. So I found this we used to fund crowd hacking and crowdsourcing challenges, and people from medicine, people from nutrition would compete to solve stubborn problems that were occurring in mining, and the winners were often someone outside of your industry. So create those moments of serendipity, find ways to cultivate environments where people can make unexpected connections. It's casual encounters, chance discoveries. So whether that's online or offline. Number 2 would be, if you want unconventional results, you need to get off the conventional path. So seek out diverse perspectives from different industries, emerging trends, and see what will work for your own organization. Lead with empathy. We talked about it before. Prioritize the well-being and the experience of the people throughout your transformation journey. And if you do this, I swear to God, it's the smartest decision you will ever make. It'll be a lot less painful. It'll be a lot less cheaper at the end. And last but not least, get the right help. So, the number of rescue jobs I've been called into when they've tried to do it themselves, tried to save money, use cheaper and inexperienced resources. Transformation doesn't happen by accident. It happens because it has commitment, expertise, discipline, grit, and shock horror resources. You really do need to resource it effectively. So leaving things up to chance, that doesn't work. If it's something that you want, you need to plan for it, and you need a budget to make it happen.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. We're seeing a lot more project rescue and recovery and expert witness stuff too. In fact, that's the majority of our revenue right now is coming from troubled projects, failed projects, expert witness projects. And that's, I guess good for us, but not good for us. I mean, that's not good for the industry. It's not good for our clients. And like you said, it's a lot more expensive to hire us or you to go fix a project than if you just would have hired us in the first place to get it right and avoid some of those pitfalls.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So your book, Future Fit Organization, where can people find it? What's the best place to order, especially for the international audience that's outside your market?
Yeah. The US is actually my second largest market. So you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble online. For people in Singapore, you can walk into Kinokuniya. For people in Sydney, you can walk into Title. And for people in Indonesia, it is stocked at Peri Plus bookstores in Jakarta and also through their online stores.
And speaking of the bookstore in Indonesia, just one last thing. It's a super interesting story about you that I really admire. Tell us how you got the book on the bookshelf in Indonesia, at least. And maybe you did the same thing in Australia and other parts too.
Oh, okay. All of the bookstores that stock my book, it's because I approached them. So I guess
just old
if you don't,
school, simple,
old school
guerrilla marketing, nothing fancy about it, no secret rocket science.
I literally walked into the bookstore in Sydney and just introduced myself. As lo and behold, the owner was behind the table, and I said, "Look, this is just published. It got 3 best-selling categories in 2 days. I'm local, blah blah blah." And he's like, "Sure." And so it was as easy as that. Singapore, the same thing. I walked into Kinokuniya, into their flagship store, asked to speak to the person that was in charge of business and leadership. Unfortunately, they were not there because I walked in on a Saturday, was given an email, and I just, FYI guys, if you're in change, you're a really good marketer. And so I simply emailed them, again, introduced myself. These are my credentials. This is my experience. This is how my book has performed. I'd love to see it in your bookstores. They replied less than 12 hours later, said we bought copies for all our stores. For Jakarta, I tried contacting them online. It was very hard to find a person responsible for this. Put it out to my network. I said, "Hey guys, anyone know who's the merchandiser at Peri Plus?" Someone from LinkedIn actually came back to me and said, "Yeah, my friend used to work there. He'll connect you." Great. Emailed the guy. Immediately said, "We're stocking it in all our bigger stores." So that's how it happened. Yeah. There was I don't have an agent. You're looking at it. Right. Well, so it's in bookstores because I put it there.
When you first told me that, I was like, it sort of like hit me across the face. I was like, it's so simple. Like in today's day and age with digital marketing and all these fancy technologies, sometimes just something real simple and old school is effective. But what that means for you is since you want, assuming it sounds like you're trying to get global, you have global distribution, at least through Amazon, some other outlets, but it sounds like you're gonna have to visit a lot more countries and just go knock on more bookstore doors. That's a way to really get the bricks and mortar distribution you're looking for.
Well, my second book is actually being published by Penguin Random House. So they are the ones that are going to get it. I don't have to do anything for my second book. They're the ones that'll get it in bookstores, into airports, etc. So that'll be out in August, September this year.
Oh, very cool. We'll have to have you on like as part of your promotional build-up.
Yeah, I know. My big book tour.
All right. Thank you, Wirya, and thank you to the audience for the great questions there. A lot of good stuff, and I look forward to reading that book. And it's a really fascinating topic, this whole concept of future fit organizations. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to bring on Kyler Cheatham and Amanda Patton from the Third Stage Consulting team talking about the role of third-party vendors and partners in digital transformation. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday, along with past episodes of the show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. You can find contact information for both myself and Major Tom Productions. You can find the contact information in the description field below, wherever you're listening or watching. And we just had Friska Wirya on the show, Darian, talking about future fit organizations. What sort of question or comment did you have from that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was such a great conversation. She has a lot of good information for companies that are looking to the future and how they can sustain the future of their company. But I think it's super important conversation for a lot of companies to dive into for the longevity of their companies.
Yeah, and I also liked how she differentiates between future-proof and future-fit. Because I always thought future-proof was kind of a weird word because you can't future-proof yourself, and that's sort of what she was saying too, is you can't future-proof, but you can be ready to change and that sort of thing. And future-proof makes it sound as though if you future-proof yourself now, you're fine. You don't have to change anymore. You're just you're gonna ride it out and you're gonna survive any changes in the future. But future-fitting is saying you're gonna constantly change, but now you're just getting the organization culturally ready and operationally ready to constantly change and be ready to adapt faster than you might have in the past. So I think that part was really interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree for sure. That's a really interesting concept because, like, you're right. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to last in the future no matter what." And so it's a really interesting concept to say, "Okay, I can be ready for the future and be ready for anything that can happen, but not going to be anything that's guaranteed." Yeah,
exactly. You're not fully insulated or protected from the future, and that's the beauty of it. And she's got a good framework or she gave us some good advice on how to think about our organizations and conditioning in the organization to get ready for the future. And, speaking of the future, this is a rough transition, but I'll try it anyway. It's not really a natural segue, but I'll try it. Speaking of the future, when organizations go through digital transformations, oftentimes they will lean on or engage with third-party vendors and partners. And that's the topic we want to get to next with our next guest, is to talk about the role of software vendors and partners in digital transformation, how you identify them, how you manage them, how you integrate them with your team, all that stuff and more. So we're going to turn it over to Kyler Cheatham from the Third Stage Consulting team, along with Amanda Patton from Third Stage Consulting, talking about the role of software vendors and partners in digital transformation.
It's absolutely critical to select the right partners and to really understand the roles of each partners within your implementation or overall digital transformation project. So with that, I am very excited to welcome Amanda to our conversation today. So Amanda, can you tell our audience just a little bit about who you are, your background, and your role here at Third Stage?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. I am Amanda Patton. I am a director here at Third Stage. and I'm relatively new to this role, but I have been working with Third Stage in multiple capacities as a senior consultant and a manager for the past 3 years and some change. I come from the software vendor side, where I did industry manager work and then also analyst relations. And so I've got the advantage of getting to see things from all these different, vantage points. But as a director at Third Stage, one of my main mandates is to leverage and grow our relationships with partners out in the ecosystem and from a PMO perspective. And it's a very interesting role to be in, and we are directing the work, I guess. So we're assembling the team, we're scoping the projects, we're selecting, partners. The client actually is selecting the partners, but we're helping them, advising them on selecting not only the software vendor, but the partner who's going to help them implement it.
Absolutely. And well, first and foremost, congratulations. And thank you so much for joining our great team here. I know you've been on some of our podcasts and in our thought leadership for a while now, but it's very exciting to welcome you formally as you are now kind of a leader on the Third Stage team. So we're very fortunate to have your background. And as you mentioned, you have this unique perspective on being on both sides, from not only being on the vendor side of the business, which we have a variety of team members that were also understanding and having a deeper understanding of those advisory or alliance services and those relationships with partners that are, say, independent or technology agnostic, like Third Stage, or just the overall partner situation and perspective. So, with that, knowing that kind of your situation, how important would you say from a top line is it to understand the roles of each partner within an implementation project?
There's nothing more important from my perspective, because if you don't plan and really sit down, slow down, take a breath, and plan, do the planning on the front end, or you're going to kind of pay for it later. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But regarding the question you just asked, it's very important that we all have a very clear scope. And I understand as Third Stage where my lane is. You understand as the vendor where your lane is, as the system integrator, so that we aren't competing or creating more work for the client. And just also so we have a seamless project. We have a clearly defined scope of work, which of course is flexible as the project moves forward. But I say that if you skip that part, there's just going to be a lot of confusion and maybe infighting or even competition that just doesn't need to happen. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team. We have all agreed to work hard together toward the outcome, which is a successful implementation for the client. And so we've got to check our egos at the door and come in and all decide which parts of the project we are in charge of. And then you need that PMO, vision that kind of overarches and ties everything together. So I would say it's critical.
Absolutely. And, knowing what each role does is super important too. So say you are, working with a client that's really in their phase 0 era of planning their digital transformation. They're kind of just laying the groundwork, which is where we always recommend engaging an independent digital transformation coach so that you really can get into the strong foundation of project planning. So what are some considerations you need to keep in mind when, quote unquote, interviewing potential implementation partners?
The first thing I think is just kind of the obvious. Are they experts in that system? Do they have references? Do they have a good reputation? Have you talked to people who they've implemented for? How did it go? So that's obviously, if we're interviewing anybody, a contractor for something in our house, like we're going to want to talk to people. How did they do on your bathroom repair? So that seems pretty obvious. But then you need to look at things like budget. You need to look at timeline. You need to look at cultural fit. Do we get along? Do we work well together? Do we all respect each other? And I would say also part of the cultural fit, I guess a subset of that would be, the client is in charge. And people forget that, and it's important. And we're always reminding our customers, our clients, this is your implementation. You determine the timeline, you determine the pace. And so making sure that you've got a vendor and a system integrator who is respectful of that and who will work with you instead of, forcing timelines or products or things that you may or may not be on board with. So for me, I think those are the, first of all, do you know what you're doing? How good are you at implementing the system? And then people overlook the cultural stuff, like a soft issue, like something that, it's whatever, we'll figure it out. It's really important. It's really important.
And understanding I think a lot of misperceptions around that is you actually do have choices. So can you talk about kind of options that you have when looking at an implementation partner? How should you consider kind of making sure that you understand the landscape of the space and what partners you should look at engaging?
I mean, our favorite line is, it depends. Yeah. But it depends, because there are some systems like, I don't want to name names, but there are some where you have partners, you have an implementation partner on every corner for said system.
Exactly. Yeah.
So your search may be a little more overwhelming. And so for me, I think you need to get references and get referrals from people in your industry that you talk to. And that happens all the time, where people are references, or it's like, okay, you're a mid-market manufacturer and you implemented this and you guys used this partner and they did a fantastic job. I would rather go on something like that than go out to the market and tell me and see what the marketing materials tell me who the top 3 implementers of that solution are, right? I want to talk to a real person who's done that. So that would be one thing. I think also having a third party involved, whether it's Third Stage or someone else, to make sure that you have someone who is advocating for you, who has your back. I'm not saying anybody's malicious or trying to be a bad person, but like, we all have self-interest that we're serving out in the world, and vendors want to sell more software and implementers want to implement more software. And so it's important that you've got somebody in the mix that will give you honest feedback. And again, I think word of mouth and talking to people. And a lot of times it's very interesting because these C-suite, these executives that we work with, they will reach out to people, peers, competitors even, and have conversations, and in that conversation, they're usually going to get the good, bad, and the ugly. But I'd much rather have a real live example, than going to some ranking system out on the internet that may or may not be true. And just because they're the top implementer for that solution doesn't mean they're the top implementer for your organization. I think it's really important to talk to people in your industry around your size who may need some of the same nuanced secret sauce type of stuff that your business is going to need.
We're here with Amanda and Kyler from the Third Stage Consulting team talking about the role of software vendors and partners in digital transformation. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also learn more and watch past episodes at Transformation Ground Control as well, or transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. We're here in the midst of a conversation with Kyler and Amanda from Third Stage Consulting talking about the role of software vendors and partners in digital transformation. Let's turn it back over to Amanda and Kyler.
There's so much good information in there. One, understanding that everyone has an agenda. And I love how PC you are too. Like, everyone has an agenda. Their job is to sell you software. Their job is to implement. That's how they make their money. That's how their business model runs. So no, they're not terrible people, but they do have an agenda of what that looks like. And we talk a lot, and the example of you gave about kind of the different entities within the industry. We have D365, Microsoft Dynamics D365 or 365 as number one on our top 10 ERP systems. So there's a lot of great things about them. Another kind of drawback behind them or an issue we see is just the consistency in the marketplace, because there are so many third-party resellers, and you really need to make sure you get the right partner that not only fits your requirements, your needs, has the experience, and then also that referral muscle or that referral network that you really can engage and flex upon. We have a lot of businesses that we may work with through a PMO project that their direct competitor will then call us up and say, hey, we're looking to do X, Y, and Z. And we're like, wait, we thought you guys didn't like each other. But knowing that you have that industry experience and that expertise in a similar business is just so critical to ensuring that all makes sense. One thing I really want to kind of dig into that you touched upon and expand upon is the cultural piece of it. And you had mentioned that is kind of a soft metric. If you have all of this extensive experience, but it may not be a culture fit, is that a huge red flag? Or is that just kind of a consideration that you say, they may not jive with our team so much, but they do check all the boxes on the technical side? What's the balance there?
It depends. Look, if you, first of all, I have to be honest and say that it is not consistent. You might have a fantastic implementation with a vendor or with a system integrator in Ohio, and then you may 6 months later do a very similar implementation with the same vendor, same SI in California, and it's not good at all. So that's one thing to know. They run by territories. You can't pick your favorite team and have them do all your stuff all over the world. Unfortunately, wherever they are, that's who's going to get deployed, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on where you're located. And so I want to just say that, first of all, there's never any vendor or SI who always does a great job or always does a terrible job. It's just not that simple, for one thing. So I'll give you an example. One of the implementations that I've done in the last couple of years, we had 4 vendors in the hunt. RFPs came back, 2 of them kind of advanced, into demos. And so they had their showdown. And from a scoring perspective, these 2 vendors pretty much were neck and neck. Do you know what I mean? And even in the negotiation phase, and we're talking about price, they got to where they were, within very little money of each other, right? So at this point, you're looking at it like, this is a really tough one. And the client ended up going for the better cultural fit, right? So that's an easier situation. But if you've got 4 vendors and it's narrowed down to 3 or 2, one of them is like A plus and the rest of them are B or C, but the A plus is not a cultural fit. That's a tougher spot to be in, a couple of questions. So the balance is, for me, really understanding that you're going to be in a kind of a marriage with this vendor. This is a very long-term commitment with an ERP system, right? Or 10, 20, 30 years. I don't know. I'm not married, so I don't, I'm just kidding though, but really it is a relationship. So at some point, the implementation team, all of us, everybody's going to roll off the project. And then guess who's going to have to be in relationship together for a long time. So if it's irreconcilable, that's going to be a really big problem. The other thing is the sales team. Maybe you don't get along really well with the sales team. Well, that's not who's going to be doing your implementation. So it's really hard. It's really hard to know. I've had instances before where certain vendors or SIs were borderline condescending because they're up on all the newest technology. They live and breathe the technology and it's all modern. And then you walk into a manufacturing facility where they've been running the same green screen legacy hotkey for 36 years. And they may not know a lot about technology, but they know more about manufacturing than anybody. And you've got some people, some vendors or SIs who are a little bit, can be a little bit arrogant. And that doesn't go over very well. And so again, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but you have to also remember that sales team, once they close the deal, they're gone. They're on to the next. So it could be that you're going to get along great with professional services, the implementation team or the SI or whoever. So I didn't really answer your question because it's a case by case. I think it's very important.
Really? No, you did. Our favorite answer. It depends, because it truly does. And that's the point, as I always say, of those questions, is really looking at that this is going to be your implementation. And you touched a little bit on project ownership. But I wonder, kind of as a follow-up to that question, if you could expand on the importance of internalizing project ownership.
You mean for the client or for?
Yes. So the importance, we talk a lot here at Third Stage about not losing yourself to what the vendor says or what your partner or implementation partner, because that can be really something that's difficult, right? They are the experts. You want to lean on their support, but in some level, if you get too entrenched, either from a resource perspective or from a monetary perspective, you can really be in that trouble point that you had kind of just touched on. So I want to kind of explain to the audience from your perspective of the importance of understanding the project ownership and the internalization of the overall strategy.
I hope this doesn't sound self-serving, but I'm going to say it again. You need to have some type of neutral party involved, whether it's third stage or some other, like whoever, that's not the client and it's not the vendor and it's not the system integrator. It's someone else who can kind of look at the whole big picture, because what happens is if you're in manufacturing, let's say, aerospace and defense, oil and gas, whatever, pick an industry. Maybe you don't know a lot about ERP software. And so it's very easy to defer all of your decisions to the experts, the vendors, the SIs, whatever. The problem with that is if somebody's selling you more than you need, or telling you the software does XYZ, and maybe it doesn't do it exactly the way without $30,000 worth of customizations, let's say, like these are the things that you can easily be, and I hate to make it sound like vendors or anybody are doing anything bad, but it's easy to be manipulated or misled or sold to. What we say a lot to clients is you don't need that yet. You're not ready for that type of functionality. That's a phase 3 thing. Let's stay focused over here. Let's keep the scope and the budget, so that would be, for me, the most important part, because if you don't, the project could run away without you. Like I have seen that where clients find themselves on this merry-go-round and they can't get off of it because they sort of handed the keys over to the system integrator or the vendor or whatever. And then you've got scope creep, you're over budget, you've got all these customizations that you've got to now maintain. And then later you find out maybe you didn't even need those customizations necessarily. So that's why it's important. You've got to have the ownership, the steering committee, the leadership, the business process owners at every single level of the organization have got to have a seat at the table. And sometimes, all the time, everyone at these companies are doing their day job. They're really busy, And so sometimes it's easier to defer or to say, oh, we don't really know. You guys just, tell us what's best practice. What do other oil and gas companies do type of deal. That's a mistake. You need to know your process, and your people have to have a seat at the table to say, well, that may be best practice for the industry, but that's not how we do it. And can the software meet us where we are in this area? So yeah, it's really, really important. And I think a lot of times people are just too trusting. That's one of the reasons why project management and PMO is so important, because every move that anyone makes needs to be documented. A lot of times, especially being on, we've been involved in many expert witness, documentation is key. And so if you're from a PMO perspective, any change order, anytime something on the critical path gets into the yellow zone and it's communicated to the SI or the vendor and it's not handled in a timely manner, which is their end of the deal, right? They're part of the contract. And as we know, anytime you want to get out of a contract, it can get pretty litigious. And that's never where we want to go. But those are resources that we, have had to use, that clients have had to use. So I would say, as just an add-on to that, is just to make sure that you're documenting everything, the conversations, the changes, and obviously correspondence with the vendors and system integrators. And that if things aren't being delivered that were part of your contract, part of their scope of work, then, you need to have a paper trail showing that.
We're here with Amanda and Kyler from the Third Stage Consulting team talking about the role of software vendors and partners in digital transformation. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 164. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also learn more and watch past episodes at Transformation Ground Control as well, or transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. We're here in the midst of a conversation with Kyler and Amanda from Third Stage Consulting talking about the role of software vendors and partners in digital transformation. Let's turn it back over to Amanda and Kyler.
Well, and that's so easy to do, especially if you actually, made a financial commitment and you feel as though your statement of work and contract lays out all of the different areas in which this supportive relationship will be. But if you don't have kind of that insurance policy, as we call it, of those independent advisors that are dedicated to your business goals, their success is going to be your success in that piece. Then you really need that ability to kind of manage through that. So I know you touched a little bit on kind of third stage PMO or having an independent and technology agnostic PMO, but we kind of touched on some of our recent thought leadership of just not only the saturation of niche products, of interoperability products, of platform-based, all of these different solutions. So you have all of that, but then you also have all of these agendas and different pieces that you're managing. So our PMO, we call it mission control, is our mission control here kind of takes that all, think of a mission control for a rocket ship and has kind of the control levers of the project all in one place. So can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and the importance of having that kind of one lighthouse of a PMO resource on a project?
We all come in with our own plan, right? Client knows what they're looking for. The vendor, everybody has their own thing. And it's like, if I'm building a house and I have 17 contractors handling their specialty area, I need a foreman. I need a GC to kind of see everything together, the budget, the timeline, quality of the deliverables, and making sure that things like And I'll switch back to the analogy of, away from the house building and toward, what we do, which is, data migration and training and, are we resourcing this project appropriately? Well, what if I'm only looking at that through the third stage lens? What if I'm only looking at it through the software vendor lens or the SI lens or the client lens? Well, that's what happens, right? Like, we want to say that we're looking at the big picture, but when you get caught up in the minutia of an implementation, it's easy to lose sight of the big picture and to really drill, because we have deliverables, we have demo, we have all kinds of stuff going on. We're really busy, and it gets hard to keep a big, picture view. And so to answer your question, we are going to look at all of that. We're going to manage really program management, because we're managing many, many projects within a project. And we're neutral, right? Again, we don't have an agenda. We don't care who you go with from a vendor or an SI perspective, as long as they make you happy as the client. Does it fit your business requirements, your timeline, your budget, your culture? Will you achieve the business outcomes that you're setting out to achieve? Like, that's what we care about. So for me, it's easy to get off into rabbit holes, because these things get very complicated. They really do. And then you're bringing in other bolt-ons, and you've got a data migration team over here, and it gets out of control very quickly. And so you really need somebody who's looking at the whole part, and calling out risk before they turn into issues, right? Not just in our little world of third stage, but in the whole world of the project. And there's, and it's cool because we're not seen as the good cop or the bad cop, or we're just sort of the neutral observer, right? We're doing things, we're managing things, we're alerting to risk, and we're planning and all that kind of stuff. But if we say, hey, what's going on over here? If this falls behind, these other 7 things are going to fall behind. It doesn't feel like, it's not like an attack or anything. It's just an observation. That's what we're doing. That's why we're there. That's what PMO does. So.
Absolutely. And having a resource that has that 10,000 foot view of the project, because a lot of times you can get so hyper focused as an internal team on one area that's in the green, this is going awesome, but then shifting over to maybe an organizational assessment or a different piece in which you're like, oh, this is not actually performing at the level that we wanted it to perform at. But investing in that resource that can kind of see and then manage 2 partners and have the insight to managing 2 partners. Because it's one thing, to feel as though you have that internal capability of, oh, I can manage outside vendors. That's a very normal process within our business. But have you done it for an actual software implementation? Because there's nuances to that. You mentioned something like data migration, which is a huge piece of a digital transformation. And that's something that you need to at least have that phase 0 side of, and that implementation plan around, but also being able to execute it in the way that you're going to have that visibility. So I think that that's really, really critical to understanding that. And mission control is something a lot of times we do post-election, just because we've had such a great relationship with a client or our partners, and just moving through the synergy of the group. We call it, getting the band back together type of thing. So knowing the synergistics that we bring to it, and I know you know this well, Amanda, because you're not only one of our most top requested resources, but you also, you're not to be trifled with on the vendor side, right? So can you kind of talk about the way that third stage kind of works with our different partners in that area, and the importance of, not only setting expectations, but having this energy to innovate and solve critical problems that are going to come up 100% of the time within a digital transformation project?
My loyalty is always to the client. And as long as I remember that, that makes my job, well, not easy, but it makes my job clear. I know I need to remember what my objective is. And I need to keep my ear close to the ground enough to know when something isn't right across all the partners and all the projects and all the subsets of projects and all the things, but not be in the weeds. I've got to also be able to see, the big picture. And then we have to be willing to be creative. We have to be willing to pivot if something isn't working. We have to be able to have tough conversations with the client sometimes, or with the vendor or the SI. We are looking for problems, identifying problems before they become, especially critical path, right? Before they have the ability to derail the project from any perspective, time, money, accomplishing what the client wants. And when we see inconsistencies between what was sold and what is being delivered, or anything else that causes issues for the client, we are their advocate. Because again, that relationship between the vendor and the client is going to be long-term. That's a marriage that's going to go on long after we're, there. And so they need to learn how to work through their problems, through their disagreements, and make changes as necessary. But you've got to be willing to be creative too, and to say no, and to push back, and to say, that's not going to work for us. And you hear it all the time in Eric's videos and different people, saying, do not let software squish you into some kind of box. At the end of the day, probably 80% of the functionality is the same, like in most of these, but then it depends, right? Are you a process manufacturer? Are you in apparel? What is it that you're doing? And you need that specialty sometimes. And sometimes it's not with the vendor who's standing up your ERP system. Sometimes it is some type of, specialty, composable ERP, as we've been talking about a lot. And again, an SI, a vendor may have their plan for you when they come in, and that may not be the best plan. So I think having the ability and the confidence to speak up for your business and say, we appreciate your advice and we understand what you're saying, but for us, we're not going to change this process. We're going to keep this process the way it is, and we need your software to accommodate us instead of the other way around. And then have somebody to have your back, right? Third stage, have somebody to enforce that and to make sure that the client is protected. And 9 times out of 10, everybody plays very nicely together. But when they don't, we can deal with that too.
Yeah. Help to troubleshoot. I think one of our clients said it great in a case study we did of really healing the relationship. If there is a relationship you're really struggling with, third stage a lot of times can come in and help triage that. That's the goal, right? To keep everyone together and to move timelines, or make the project healthy again. So the final thoughts here, Amanda, that I want to ask you about is if you do feel as though you're in a situation where the partner is not working, as kind of a conclusion to this conversation, what are some things you can do as a business to address that when you have an actual partner that may not be in the best standing, or you don't feel as though you have that synergy with them? What are some troubleshooting tactics?
The first thing I would advise is to meet with your neutral advisors. Like when we're involved and this comes up, it's a conversation with the client and us of let's just really take stock of what's going on, so that we understand. Sometimes it could be the team, the specific team for that SI. Other times, maybe it's just the SI in general, that it's just not gonna, work. And then you've got to start thinking about, renegotiating or getting out of certain agreements. That can get that can get pretty complicated pretty quickly. I haven't been involved in too many of those. Generally, when that comes up, we are able to salvage the relationship and to get back on track. We may need to switch out some people. We may need to make some changes on a team level. But, that would be my first advice, is to, consult with us first, and then maybe we go talk to them, to the vendor or the SI on the client's behalf. But it really just depends on what the problem is. What are the problems? What's the issue? Sometimes it can be salvaged, and sometimes maybe not. But when you enter into contracts with people, it's not always easy to untangle from them.
Absolutely. It's actually one of the hardest things to do. And we know that a lot from our expert witness work, which is why, that prep work and understanding those, again, nuances of being quote unquote trapped into a conversation or a relationship contractually is really dangerous. And that's when our friends like Taft Law or Marcus Harris gets involved, and we do some expert witness work. But the goal is to always kind of avoid that, right? And avoid all of those different pieces.
All right. Thank you, Amanda and Kyler. Good conversation and good stuff. Very important topic, something that is helpful as organizations navigate how they build their internal team, as well as how they build and engage with their third-party teams. So some good advice there to help us through that. So as you think about or look to what Amanda and Kyler talked about, Darian, what were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that?
Yeah, I think it was a really good conversation. I had a couple questions that I wanted to kind of follow up the conversation with for
Sure.
you. The first question is, can you explain the risks associated with becoming too dependent on a vendor's guidance or resources during the implementation process?
Yeah, that's a great common question and a common mistake that organizations make, is they get too dependent on third-party consultants. And you have to look at, sort of the dynamic that happens or evolves in these cases. One is organizations typically don't go through these digital transformations very often. So they need, on one hand, they need outside expertise. They need someone who knows how to handle this. They know the software, they know the technology, they have experience implementing that technology. So you do need third parties, but what happens when you rely too much on them is, first of all, you end up with a really big bloated budget. You end up paying a ton of money for these outside consultants that typically are not very transparent and accountable to how many hours they bill and what kind of invoices you're paying for, especially because, again, you don't know a lot about digital transformation. You don't know how long it takes to build the software or to configure it or to do whatever it is they're doing. So, when you rely too much on the outside consultants, that cost risk becomes inflated. It's even more of a factor in those cases. And potentially even more importantly is that you end up losing control of your project, in that your outside consultants and software vendors end up deciding for you how you're going to run your business. And you need people that are sort of on even footing with the third-party consultants that can bring that business understanding, the strategic understanding of where you're headed as an organization and what you want to be as an organization. You have to have that equality, if you will. Otherwise, it just gets out of balance where, for example, if you have 40 people from outside consultants that are working on your project, but you only have like 5 part-time people internally on your team, I mean, that tells me that you're not in control of this project. You're going to pay way too much. The 40 outside consultants are going to be deciding for you how you run your business, which generally is not a good thing. Sometimes they might guess and get it right, but usually that's not a good solution in most cases. So those are the biggest challenges I see, or the biggest risks I see with depending too much on outside consultants.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And speaking of wanting everybody to be on like kind of the same wavelength essentially and have the same ideas and everything going forward, what are some challenges that might arise if there is a mismatch between a client culture and the implementation team approach?
Well, I think first you want to make sure you find the right cultural fit. I mean, that's the ideal answer, is just don't get yourself in that situation in the first place. Find someone that is a good cultural fit, both in terms of the people they provide and the methodology they provide. On the methodology side, though, I would say there's more often than not a mismatch between implementation methodology and client needs. And the reason is because, first of all, most implementation methodologies from different software vendors look very similar. I mean, there's not something that would suggest that software vendors don't know what they're doing or they don't have a good methodology for deploying software. The problem is that it's incomplete because it's only made for deploying software. It's not made for changing a business, changing the operations, changing the people. It's made to just deploy technology. And so most organizations don't want to just deploy technology. They want to change their business and get their people to use the system, get value out of it, and that sort of thing. So I don't know that that's a cultural mismatch, but there's oftentimes a strategic mismatch between the implementer's methodology and the methodology you need to make your project more successful, which typically includes a lot of other methodologies and tools that augment and support what the software vendor is doing. And that's a big part of what we do at Third Stage is we don't do what software vendors and system integrators and implementation technical partners, whatever you want to call them, we don't do what they do, but what we do is we wrap around them and provide all the other stuff that they don't do. So the program management, the process improvement, the change management, the architecture and integration, the data migration. So it's sort of like that they provide one bucket of an entire program, and you've got to figure out how you're going to get that right, that balance right.
Right. That makes sense. What a great conversation. I think there's a lot of key things that we can learn and everybody can learn from that conversation. So
yeah, absolutely. It was a good conversation and appreciate having them on. And they're both frequent long-term guests of the show, so I appreciate having them on to discuss that again. So great episode. Thank you, Darian, for co-hosting again, and thank you to the audience for the great questions. Look forward to seeing you again next week, every Wednesday, same time, same place. We release new episodes. You can also go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes, as well as keep up with upcoming new episodes as well. Whatever platform you listen or watch, just go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. Again, this show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is the company that I work for. It's an independent consulting firm that helps clients with digital transformations, including digital strategy, software selection, and implementation. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions. You can learn more about Major Tom, and you can also reach out for sponsorship opportunities for this podcast, as well as some of our other sister podcasts, by using the contact information below. You can find that in the description field of this podcast. So have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Transformation Ground Control.